I dug up a Polaroid camera. The photos show someone else's nightmare. The dust devils kicked up red soil behind the bulldozer as it clawed at the hillside behind my property. For weeks, the whine of heavy machinery had been a constant companion, the soundtrack to the slow death of the woods I'd loved since I was a kid. Progress, they called it. Another soulless development of McMansions, all beige siding and identical landscaping. I hated it. I bought my farmhouse, a rambling, two-story relic built sometime in the late 1800s, specifically for its isolation. It sat on 5 acres, a buffer against the encroaching suburban sprawl. Now that buffer was being bulldozed into oblivion. That afternoon, I decided to salvage something from the wreckage. I grabbed a shovel and headed towards the construction zone, hoping to unearth some interesting artifacts before the graders flattened everything. I wasn't trespassing exactly. The foreman knew I was the cranky neighbor. He just sighed and waved me on, figuring I'd get bored eventually. After an hour of fruitless digging, I was about to give up when the shovel struck something hard. It wasn't a rock. I dropped to my knees and started clawing away the dirt, revealing a rusted metal box about the size of a shoebox. It was heavy, the lid sealed shut with layers of rust. Back in my workshop, I wrestled the box open. Inside, nestled in decaying velvet lining, was an old Polaroid camera, the kind with the big square prints. It was in surprisingly good condition, considering its age. Next to it were several packs of Polaroid film and a small, leather-bound notebook. The pages were brittle and filled with faded handwriting. My heart quickened. This was exactly the kind of thing I lived for. I carefully loaded one of the film packs into the camera. The whirring motor was a familiar, comforting sound. I pointed the camera at a rusty wrench hanging on my wall and pressed the shutter. A moment later, the photo slid out, the blank square slowly resolving into an image. The picture was grainy and imperfect, but undeniably there. The wrench, hanging in sharp focus against the blurred background of my workshop. It was cool. The next day, I started going through the notebook. The handwriting was tight and spidery, almost illegible in places. It seemed to be a journal detailing the daily life of someone living in the area, sometime in the 1970s. The entries were mundane at first, descriptions of the weather, farm chores, local gossip. Then the tone began to shift. The entries became shorter, more fragmented, filled with paranoia and unease. References to them to being watched, to strange things happening in the woods. I felt a chill creep down my spine. I decided to develop the rest of the film. The first few photos were unremarkable: a dilapidated barn, a sun-drenched field, a woman standing in front of a farmhouse that looked eerily familiar. The woman was young, with long dark hair and a sad, almost haunted look in her eyes. Then the pictures changed. The next photo showed the same woman, but her face was obscured by shadows. The background was distorted, as if the camera had been shaken during the shot. The following picture was even worse. Just a blur of dark shapes and colors, with a faint impression of a human form lying on the ground. My stomach clenched. I kept going, driven by a morbid curiosity I couldn't explain. The pictures became increasingly disturbing. Faces were scratched out, bodies were contorted in unnatural positions, and the backgrounds were filled with menacing shadows. One photo showed a close-up of a bloodied knife. Another depicted a dark, cavernous space, with something or someone hanging from the ceiling. Sarah, my girlfriend, came home from her shift at the hospital and found me hunched over the photos, my face pale and drawn. "Liam, what is all this?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. I showed her the pictures, trying to explain my fascination, my growing sense of dread. She looked at them for a long time, her expression unreadable. "This is disturbing," she finally said. "Liam, maybe you should just throw these away. They're clearly upsetting you." "I can't," I said, shaking my head. "I need to know what happened. This could be evidence of something terrible. Evidence of someone's bad acid trip, maybe," she countered, but I could see the worry in her eyes. That night I couldn't sleep. The images from the photos kept flashing through my mind. I tossed and turned, haunted by the faces, the shadows, the sense of impending doom. I started researching the history of the area, spending hours at the local library, poring over old newspapers and historical documents. I learned that there had been a series of unsolved disappearances in the 1970s, young women who had vanished without a trace. The police had suspected foul play, but they had never found any bodies or any concrete evidence. Could these photos be connected? I showed the photos to Mr. Abernathy, my elderly neighbor. He was a recluse, rarely venturing out of his house, but he had lived in the area his entire life and knew everything about its history. He peered at the pictures through thick glasses, his face a mask of wrinkles and suspicion. "Those are old," he croaked, his voice raspy from disuse. "Very old. Haven't seen anything like that in years." "Do you recognize anyone in the photos?" I asked, my voice trembling with anticipation. He shook his head slowly. "Can't say that I do. But that camera, I think I remember someone having one like that. A strange fella, kept to himself. Lived out by the old Blackwood place." The Blackwood place, that was where the construction was happening now. "What happened to him?" I pressed. Mr. Abernathy's eyes glazed over. "Vanished, just like the others. He wouldn't say anything else. He just kept repeating, 'Let the past be, son. Some things are best left buried,' but I couldn't let it be. I was hooked. That night strange things started happening in the farmhouse. The lights flickered. I heard scratching noises coming from the attic. The temperature dropped suddenly, leaving me shivering despite the summer heat. I felt like I was being watched. I showed the photos to Detective Harding, a weary middle-aged cop with a permanent 5 o'clock shadow. He listened to my story with a skeptical expression, his eyes conveying a clear message: crackpot. "Look, Mr. Morgan," he said, leaning back in his chair. "I appreciate you coming in, but these photos are, well, they're old. And frankly, they're not exactly conclusive. We have no bodies, no witnesses, no anything. I can't open a cold case based on some grainy Polaroids. But what if these are the evidence?" I pleaded. "What if these are the key to solving those disappearances?" He sighed. "Mr. Morgan, I have real crimes to solve. I can't waste my time chasing ghosts." I left the police station feeling defeated and frustrated. Nobody believed me. Nobody understood, but I wasn't going to give up. I started visiting the locations depicted in the photos. The dilapidated barn was still standing, though it was on the verge of collapse. The sun-drenched field was now a construction site, crisscrossed with tire tracks and dotted with orange cones. The farmhouse in the photos, it was my farmhouse. I spent hours studying the photos, comparing them to my own house. The layout was identical, the windows in the same place, the porch railing the same design, but there were differences. In the photos, the house looked older, more dilapidated. The paint was peeling, the shutters were broken, and the yard was overgrown with weeds. And in one photo taken from inside the house, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A reflection in the window. A shadowy figure standing in the yard, watching. I started to feel like I was losing my grip on reality. I would wake up in the middle of the night, convinced that someone was standing in my room. I saw faces in the shadows, heard whispers in the wind. Sarah was terrified. She begged me to stop, to seek help. "Liam, you're scaring me," she said, her voice trembling. "This isn't healthy. You're obsessed. You need to let it go." But I couldn't. I was too close. I knew I was on the verge of uncovering something terrible, something that had been buried for decades. I had to know the truth. One evening, while examining the camera, I discovered a hidden compartment. It was a small, almost invisible slit in the side of the camera body. Inside, I found one last Polaroid. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. This was the answer. I pulled the photo out of the camera and waited for it to develop. The image that slowly materialized on the square of film was unlike anything I had seen before. It was a close-up of a face, a man's face. His eyes were wide and vacant, his mouth twisted into a grotesque grin. His skin was pale and clammy, and his hair was matted with blood. And behind him, in the background, I saw the unmistakable outline of my living room. This was a photo taken inside my house. But that wasn't the worst part. As the image became clearer, I realized that the man in the photo was me, or at least someone who looked exactly like me. I stumbled backward, knocking over a stack of books. My head was spinning, my vision blurring. I felt like I was falling into a bottomless pit. Suddenly, the room started to spin. The walls seemed to close in on me. The air grew thick and heavy, making it difficult to breathe. I heard a faint whispering sound like the rustling of leaves. The shadows in the corners of the room deepened, coalescing into dark, amorphous shapes. And then I saw him. A figure standing in the doorway, bathed in shadow. He was tall and thin, with long, greasy hair and a gaunt, hollow face. He was wearing a tattered shirt and stained overalls, and his eyes were burning with an unholy light. He looked exactly like the man in the Polaroid. He raised his hand, pointing a gnarled finger at me, and then he smiled. I screamed. I don't know how long I was out. When I came to, I was lying on the floor, my head throbbing, my body covered in sweat. The room was dark and silent. Had it all been a dream, a hallucination? I got to my feet and stumbled to the kitchen. I needed a drink, something to calm my nerves. As I reached for a glass, I saw something on the table, a Polaroid. It was a new photo, one I hadn't seen before. It was still developing, the image slowly emerging from the blank square. I stared at it, my heart pounding in my chest. The photo showed a dark, cavernous space, a basement perhaps. The walls were made of stone and the floor was covered in dirt. And in the center of the room, hanging from a chain suspended from the ceiling, was a human figure. The figure was shrouded in shadow, but I could see enough to know that it was a woman. She was wearing a dress that looked vaguely familiar. And as the image became clearer, I realized that I recognized the dress. It was Sarah's. Just then, I heard a car pull into the driveway. Headlights swept across the kitchen window. It was Detective Harding. He burst through the door, his gun drawn. "Mr. Morgan," he shouted. "We got a warrant. We're here to search the property." I didn't say anything. I just pointed to the Polaroid on the table. Harding looked at the photo, his face slowly paling. "What is this?" he whispered. "I don't know," I said, my voice trembling, "but I think it's in the basement." Harding called for backup, and within minutes the house was swarming with police officers. They searched every room, every closet, every nook and cranny. And then they found it. A hidden room concealed behind a false wall in the basement. The room matched the description in the photo. Stone walls, dirt floor, and a heavy chain hanging from the ceiling. And hanging from the chain was Sarah. She was dead. The police arrested me, of course. I was the prime suspect. They found my fingerprints on the camera, on the photos, on the knife that had been used to kill Sarah. But I didn't do it. I swear I didn't. I think the camera did it. I think it somehow brought the past back to life. I think it unleashed something evil, something that had been dormant for decades. I'm in jail now, awaiting trial. Nobody believes my story. They think I'm insane, but I know the truth. The truth is, the nightmare isn't over. The camera is still out there, and the film whirs to life.